The device exploded in a shower of sparks just as Lydia Stiles shoved the boy backward, her body covering his as burning metal rained down around them. Min-Jun's silent scream tore through her heart even as she felt the heat sear her shoulder. In that moment, pressed against the cold marble floor with the billionaire's deaf son trembling beneath her, Lydia made a choice that would unravel everything. She would give this child what she couldn't give her own. But the experimental hearing device wasn't the only secret she'd smuggled into this mansion. And when those dark eyes finally heard her voice, they would recognize more than just sound. Welcome to Wonderpath Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. The Lee Mansion stood like a monument to indifference, all steel and glass and cold perfection. Perched on a hillside overlooking Seoul like a judge looking down on the condemned. Lydia had walked past the golden gates 3 times before finally pressing the intercom button, her finger trembling against the cold metal. The autumn wind whipped her dark curls across her face, and she pushed them back with hands that had scrubbed floors, changed diapers, buried dreams, and now carried the weight of one last impossible hope. Yes? The voice through the speaker was clipped, efficient, bored. Lydia Stiles, I'm here for the housekeeping position. A pause. Then a buzz as the gates swung open with mechanical precision. Lydia stepped through, her worn canvas bag heavy against her shoulder, heavier than it should be for just a change of clothes and her papers. Inside the hidden pocket, wrapped in cloth that had once been a baby blanket, something small and precious waited, something that had cost her everything to create. She had researched Lee Tae-yang extensively. The man was a titan in pharmaceutical manufacturing, his company responsible for producing medications that saved millions of lives worldwide. The irony wasn't lost on her. A man who made his fortune from healing, who couldn't heal his own son. Wouldn't heal his own son if the rumors were true. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Park, met her at the servants' entrance. She was a severe woman in her 50s, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. "You're late," Mrs. Park said, though Lydia had arrived exactly on time. "I apologize." Mrs. Me Park's eyes traveled over Lydia's appearance with the kind of assessment that could reduce a person to their most basic components. Lydia knew what she saw, a woman in her early 30s, neither beautiful nor plain, with the kind of face that told stories if you bothered to look. Her father's Korean features, blended with her mother's African heritage, had given her something unique. But in this house, Lydia suspected unique meant different, and different meant suspect. "Your references are adequate," Mrs. Park continued, leading her through a maze of pristine hallways. "But understand this. The Lee household demands discretion above all else. You will see things. You will hear things. You will speak of nothing." "I understand. The master is rarely home. When he is, you will make yourself invisible." The young master, Mrs. She Park's voice took on a different quality, something between pity and distaste. "The young master is not to be disturbed. He has his own wing. You will clean it, but you will not engage with him. Is that clear?" Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. The young master being Mr. Lee's son? Min-Jun, 8 years old, he's afflicted. Mrs. Park said the word like it tasted of spoiled milk. "Deaf, completely. The master has tried everything. Nothing works. The boy is—" She paused, searching for a word that wouldn't be cruel and settling for one that was worse. "Difficult." They stopped in front of a door. Mrs. Park handed Lydia a key. "Your room. Uniforms in the closet. You start tomorrow at 5. Questions?" 1,000 questions. Where is he now? What does he look like? Does he sign? Does anyone sign with him? Does anyone touch him, speak to him, see him as anything other than a disappointment? No questions, Lydia said. Mrs. Park nodded and left, her footsteps echoing away into the vast emptiness of the house. Lydia entered her room, a small, clean space with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the gardens. She sat on the bed and pulled the hidden bundle from her bag. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it, revealing the device that had consumed the last 3 years of her life. It looked deceptively simple, a small curved piece that would fit behind the ear, connected to an almost invisible wire that led to a processor no bigger than a coin. But inside that tiny shell was technology that didn't officially exist yet, algorithms she'd helped develop during her years at the research institute before everything fell apart. Before Jae-hyun got sick, before she'd been forced to choose between saving her son and saving her career, before she'd lost anyway. She wrapped it back up carefully and hid it in the bottom of her drawer, beneath her few possessions. Then she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, remembering. Jae-hyun had been 4 when the meningitis took his hearing. 4 years old, and suddenly his world went silent. They'd caught it too late, the damage already done. She'd been working at the institute then, on the cutting edge of neural acoustic technology, so close to a breakthrough. But experimental treatments required money, clinical trials, permissions, things that took time. Time they didn't have. Her supervisor, Dr. Kim, had been sympathetic but firm. "We're years away from human trials, Lydia. I'm sorry about your son. But you can't use unauthorized technology on him. It's not ready. It's not safe." But it had been ready. She'd known it was ready. She'd run the simulations 100 times, and she'd been prepared to risk everything. To take the prototype and use it on Jae-hyun, consequences be damned. She'd gotten so close. The device had been in her hands, smuggled out of the lab in her coat pocket, when she'd gotten the call from the hospital. Pneumonia, his weakened immune system, a complication. We did everything we could. 5 years old. Her baby had been 5 years old. The institute had fired her anyway when they'd discovered what she'd tried to do. Theft of proprietary technology. Breach of ethics protocols. Her career was over. Her life was over. She'd spent the next 3 years drifting, working menial jobs, building the device in secret using everything she could remember, everything she'd managed to save on encrypted drives before they'd locked her out. She'd built it for Jae-hyun, even though Jae-hyun was gone. She'd built it because she had to finish what she'd started. She'd built it because somewhere in the world there had to be another deaf child she could save. And then she'd read about Min-Jun, the deaf son of a billionaire, the boy with access to every treatment, every specialist, every resource in the world, and still condemned to silence because conventional medicine had nothing left to offer him. The boy whose father had given up on him. She'd been working as a hotel maid when she'd seen the discreet job posting for the Lee household. It had taken her 2 months to fabricate the perfect references, to create a background that would pass scrutiny but not invite too much attention. She'd become invisible, unremarkable, exactly the kind of person the wealthy hired and forgot about. But she wasn't here to clean. She was here to give a child his hearing. And if that meant destroying herself in the process, well, she'd been destroyed a long time ago. At least this time, it would mean something. The next morning began in darkness. Lydia dressed in the provided uniform, black and white and anonymous, and reported to the kitchen at 5. The other staff barely acknowledged her beyond curt nods. In houses like this, Lydia had learned, the servants maintained their own hierarchy, and newcomers started at the bottom. She spent the morning cleaning reception rooms that looked like they'd never been used, polishing silver that never saw food, arranging flowers in vases no one would notice. The house was a museum, beautiful and dead. Around 10, Mrs. Park assigned her to the East Wing. The young master's area, she said. He should be with his tutor now, clean quickly and quietly. Lydia's heart raced as she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The East Wing was different from the rest of the house. While everything else was austere and perfect, this area felt abandoned. Not dirty, but neglected. The walls here were bare, where the rest of the house displayed expensive art. The furniture was functional, rather than ornamental. It felt like a place where someone had been exiled. She started with the hallway, dusting and polishing, working her way toward the main suite. As she approached, she heard something that made her freeze. Not voices, there was only one voice. Sharp and frustrated, speaking in Korean, but underneath it, a sound that pierced straight through her carefully constructed armor. The sound of a child crying. Not crying out loud, crying silently. She could hear it anyway. Lydia moved to the door and peered through the crack. The room beyond was large, set up as a study with a desk, bookshelves, and a large window overlooking the gardens. A woman in her 40s sat at the desk, rigid with frustration, gesturing sharply at a workbook. And in front of her, shoulders hunched, tears streaming down his face, was Min-Jun. He was small for 8, with delicate features and dark eyes that held more awareness than any child should. His hands moved in signs. Lydia recognized Korean sign language from her years of study. But the woman wasn't watching. She was pointing at the workbook, her lips moving in exaggerated shapes, trying to force the boy to read them. Min-Jun's hands moved faster, more desperately, but the woman just shook her head and pointed again. Lydia's hand tightened on the door frame. She understood what was happening. The boy was trying to communicate in sign language. The tutor was insisting on lip reading, a battle of wills where only one side had any power. Min-Jun's hands finally dropped to his lap. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. The tutor sighed in obvious exasperation, closed the workbook, and stood. She walked toward the door, and Lydia quickly moved away, pretending to dust a nearby table. The woman emerged, saw Lydia, and switched to Korean. "Don't bother him. He's having one of his moods." She checked her watch. "I'll be back in an hour. He's not to leave the room." Lydia nodded, keeping her eyes down. The perfect invisible servant. The tutor's footsteps faded down the hallway. Silence settled over the wing like dust. She should leave. Mrs. Park had been explicit. Don't engage with the boy. Do your work and go. Instead, Lydia picked up her cleaning supplies and pushed open the door to Min-Jun's study. The boy was still at his desk, his back to her, his small body trembling with the effort of keeping his crying silent. He didn't turn around. He couldn't hear her enter. Lydia set down her supplies and walked around to where he could see her. He jerked back, startled, his eyes wide and wet. Up close, she could see he had his father's features, though softened by childhood. But his eyes were different. They held something she recognized, the look of someone who'd learned that the world was a place of disappointment. She raised her hands and signed, "Hello." Min-Jun's eyes went even wider. He stared at her hands like they were speaking a language from another planet, which in this house they probably were. Lydia continued signing, keeping her movements slow and clear. My name is Lydia. What's your name? The boy's hands twitched, but he didn't respond. He looked toward the door, then back at her, his expression caught between hope and fear. The fear of being disappointed again. The fear that this couldn't be real. It's okay, Lydia signed. I can talk with you. I know sign language. Something broke in Min-Jun's expression. His hands came up, hesitant at first, then faster. You can understand me? Yes, I can understand you. Nobody understands me. His signs were sharp, angry. Nobody tries. I'm trying now. Why? His hands demanded, accusing. You're just a maid. You'll leave like everyone else. The words hit harder than they should have. Because he was right. She was planning to leave. Once she'd given him the device, once she'd restored his hearing, she'd have to disappear before anyone discovered what she'd done. This boy would lose her too, just like he'd lost everyone else who'd ever seen him as more than a problem to be solved. But that was later. Now, in this moment, she could give him something, even if it was just acknowledgement. I'm here now, Lydia signed. Tell me what you're feeling. Min-Jun stared at her for a long moment. Then his hands moved, and the words poured out like water from a broken dam. I'm angry. I'm always angry. Miss Kim wants me to read lips, but I can't. I'm not good at it. I try, but the sounds don't make sense in my head, and she gets mad, and then I get mad, and… His hands stopped abruptly. You don't care. Nobody cares. I care. You're lying. Everyone lies. Lydia pulled out the chair next to him and sat down, putting herself at his eye level. She signed carefully, making sure he caught every word. When I was young, I had a son. His name was Jae-hyun. He was deaf, like you. He died when he was 5 years old. Min-Jun's hands froze in mid-sign. He died? Yes. And before he died, I promised him I would find a way to help other children like him. That's why I'm here, Min-Jun. I'm here to help you. How? The sign was sharp with disbelief. Doctors can't help me. My father paid doctors from everywhere. America, Europe, everywhere. They all said the same thing. Nothing works. I'll be deaf forever. What if I told you I have something that might work? Something the doctors don't have? Min-Jun's expression cycled through disbelief, hope, and back to protective cynicism. You're lying. I'm not lying. Then show me. Lydia's heart hammered. It was too soon. She needed time to study his medical records, to understand the exact nature of his hearing loss, to calibrate the device properly. But looking at this boy's face, seeing the desperate hope he was trying so hard to hide, she knew she couldn't make him wait. Not when he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to actually help him. Not now, she signed. But soon, I promise. Will you trust me? I don't trust anyone. That's smart. Trust should be earned. Lydia stood and picked up her cleaning supplies. I'll come back, and when I do, I'll show you what I have. Until then, will you keep this secret? Don't tell anyone we talked. Min-Jun studied her with those two old eyes. Then slowly, he nodded. Lydia signed a goodbye and left the room, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip her supplies. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and tried to steady her breathing. What had she just promised? She'd essentially told this boy she could restore his hearing. And yes, she believed the device would work, but believed and knew were different things. If she failed, she wouldn't just be disappointing him, she'd be destroying him. But she'd already destroyed herself. What was one more ruin? The next few days fell into a pattern. Lydia did her work efficiently, invisibly, drawing no attention from the other staff. She learned the rhythms of the house. Lee Tae-yang left early and returned late, if he returned at all. Mrs. Park ran the household with military precision. The other servants gossiped about their employers, but avoided the East Wing like it was cursed. And every day, for a brief window, when Min-Jun's tutor took her break, Lydia visited him. They communicated in sign language, and slowly, carefully, Min-Jun began to open up. He told her about his life, painting a picture that broke her heart, piece by piece. His father barely looked at him. His mother had left when he was 3, unable to handle the shame of having a disabled child, or so the servants said. Min-Jun thought maybe she'd just been tired of being married to a man who loved his company more than his family. "He looks at me like I'm broken," Min-Jun signed one afternoon. They were sitting on the floor of his room, a puzzle spread out between them. "Like I'm a mistake that reflects badly on him." "You're not broken," Lydia signed back. "You're different. Different isn't broken." "Then why does everyone treat me like I am?" She had no answer to that. Or rather, she had too many answers, none of them good. Because people feared difference. Because a billionaire's son was supposed to be perfect, a continuation of his father's legacy, and deafness didn't fit that narrative. Because the world was cruel to those who deviated from expectations. "Your father is wrong," Lydia finally signed. "You're smart. You're strong. You've survived in a house full of people who don't understand you. That takes more courage than most people have." Min-Jun's eyes glistened. "Do you really have something that can help me?" "Yes." "What is it?" "A device. Something that will let you hear." "Like a hearing aid?" "I tried those. They don't work." "This is different. More advanced. It connects directly to your auditory nerve, bypasses the damaged parts of your ear." Min-Jun's hands moved slowly, carefully forming the next question. "Will it hurt?" "No. It's not surgery. It's just a small device that fits behind your ear." "And then I'll hear everything? Voices? Music? Birds?" The hope in his signs was devastating. "Yes. All of that." "When?" "Soon. I need to make sure it's calibrated correctly. I need to access your medical records to understand exactly what kind of hearing loss you have." "They're in Father's study. He keeps all my medical files there." "Can you show me where?" That night, long after the household had gone to sleep, Lydia crept through the dark hallways to the master study. Min-Jun had drawn her a map, his small hands carefully sketching out the layout. The study was locked, but the lock was old-fashioned, and Lydia had learned a few useful skills in her years of desperation. The file was exactly where Min-Jun had said it would be, in a cabinet labeled with his name. She pulled it out and began to read, using the light from her phone to illuminate the pages. The medical history was extensive. Countless tests, specialist consultations, experimental treatments, severe sensorineural hearing loss, bilateral, congenital, damage to the cochlear hair cells. Previous attempts at cochlear implants had failed due to nerve damage. The prognosis was clear: permanent, irreversible deafness. But Lydia's device didn't work like a cochlear implant. It didn't just stimulate the cochlear nerve. It used neural mapping technology to interface directly with the auditory cortex, bypassing the damaged nerve pathways entirely. It was experimental, untested on humans, and absolutely her only hope. She photographed every page of the file, then carefully returned it and locked the cabinet. As she turned to leave, a voice behind her made her freeze. "What are you doing in here?" Li Tae-yang stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the hallway lights. He was taller than she'd expected, imposing in his perfectly tailored suit even at this late hour. His face was hard, the face of a man who'd built an empire by never showing weakness. Lydia's mind raced. She was caught, clearly guilty. No excuse that would hold up to scrutiny. She could run, but where would she go? She could lie, but he'd check the cabinet, see what she'd been looking at, or she could tell him the truth. "I was looking at your son's medical records," she said in Korean, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Because I have something that can help him." Lee Tae-yang's expression didn't change. "Who are you?" "My name is Lydia Stiles. I used to work at the Institute of Neural Technology. I specialized in auditory restoration." "Used to work there?" "I was fired for trying to use unauthorized technology to help my own deaf son." Something flickered in his eyes. "Your son. He died 5 years ago, before I could save him." The silence stretched out, heavy and dangerous. Then Lee Tae-yang stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He moved to his desk, sat down, and gestured for her to sit across from him. Lydia obeyed, her heart pounding. "Explain," he said. It wasn't a request. So Lydia explained. She told him about the neural acoustic interface technology she'd been developing, about the device she'd built from memory and stolen data, about how it could potentially restore hearing even in cases like Min-Jun's, where conventional methods had failed. Lee Tae-yang listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "And you came here under false pretenses, infiltrated my household, accessed confidential medical information, all to conduct an unauthorized medical experiment on my son." "Yes, that's insane." "Yes, it's also illegal." "I know. Why should I believe you? For all I know, this device of yours could harm him." Lydia met his gaze steadily. "You shouldn't believe me. I'm a disgraced researcher with no credentials, no institutional backing, and no proof beyond my word. But I'll tell you what I do have. Nothing left to lose. I've already lost my career, my son, everything that mattered. I built this device because I had to finish what I started, because somewhere in the world there had to be a child I could save. Your son is that child. And yes, there's risk. But what's the alternative? He stays deaf forever, while you continue to resent him for something he can't control." She watched the words hit him, saw something crack in his carefully constructed facade. For just a moment, Lee Tae-yang looked like what he was, a father who'd failed his son, and knew it. "I don't resent him," he said quietly. "Then why do you avoid him?" "Because every time I look at him, I see my failure. I built a pharmaceutical empire. I make drugs that cure diseases, that extend lives, that give people hope. But I can't help my own son. What kind of man does that make me?" "A human one," Lydia said. "But humanity isn't an excuse for abandonment. Your son needs you. Whether he can hear or not, he needs his father." Lee Tae-yang was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Show me the device." Lydia retrieved it from her room and brought it to the study. She unwrapped it carefully, laying it on the desk between them. Lee Tae-yang examined it, his expression skeptical. This tiny thing is supposed to restore hearing." "Not restore, remap. The device uses neural interface technology to create new pathways between sound input and the auditory cortex. It essentially teaches the brain a new way to hear." "That's impossible." "That's what they said about cochlear implants 50 years ago." Lee Tae-yang picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. "If this works, if you can actually do what you claim, it would be worth billions. Why give it to us for free?" "Because I didn't build it for money. I built it for my son. Your son is getting the gift Jae-hyun never did. And if it fails, if it damages him, Then I'll accept whatever consequences you decide. Prison, payment, whatever you want. But it won't fail. I've tested it 1,000 times on simulation. The technology is sound. Simulations aren't human children. No, but your son is running out of options, Mr. Lee, and so am I. Li Tae-yang set down the device. You're asking me to let you perform an experimental procedure on my son using untested technology based purely on your word that it will work. Yes, that's insane. Yes, he laughed, short and bitter. Do you know what I've spent on doctors for Min-Jun? Millions, and every one of them gave me hope before they gave me another failure. Why should you be any different? Because I'm not doing this for money or reputation. I'm doing this because I know what it's like to lose a deaf child, and I will not lose another one if I can help it. Li Tae-yang studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out over the dark gardens. If I allow this, he said slowly, and anything goes wrong, I will destroy you. I have the resources to make sure you never work again, never have peace again. Do you understand? I understand. And if it works, Lydia hesitated, then your son will hear, and maybe you'll start actually being his father. Li Tae-yang turned to face her. You don't pull punches, do you? I don't have time for politeness. Your son is miserable. He's isolated and lonely and convinced he's a disappointment. Every day you ignore him is another day you confirm his worst fears about himself. You think I don't know that? The words came out sharper than intended. Li Tae-yang took a breath, visibly controlling himself. I never wanted him to feel that way. When he was born, when we found out he was deaf, I thought I could fix it. I thought with enough money, enough resources, enough determination, I could make him normal. But nothing worked. And the more I tried, the more I saw him as a problem to solve instead of a son to love. By the time I realized what I was doing, the distance between us was too wide to cross. It's not too wide, Lydia said softly, but you have to try. Even if the device works, even if he can hear, he'll still be the same boy. The boy who learned sign language because no one else would. The boy who cries silently because he's learned his tears don't matter. The boy who needs his father to see him as something other than broken. Li Tae-yang closed his eyes. When can you test the device? It needs calibration, based on his specific neural patterns. That will take a few days. Then we can try it. Do it, but I want daily reports. And if I see any sign that this is harming him, we stop immediately. Agreed. And Ms. Stiles, thank you for caring about my son when I failed to. Lydia stood to leave, then paused. It's not too late, Mr. Lee, to be the father he needs, but you have to start now, before the distance becomes permanent. Over the next 3 days, Lydia worked with Min-Jun in secret, running baseline tests disguised as games. She measured his neural responses, using portable equipment she'd smuggled into the house piece by piece. She mapped his auditory cortex, using algorithms running on her laptop. And she told him stories about Jae-hyun, about the little boy who'd loved dinosaurs and music, even though he couldn't hear it. Did he look like me? Min-Jun signed one afternoon. No, he looked like his father, but he had your spirit, your strength. I'm not strong. You're stronger than you know. You've survived in a world that doesn't accommodate you. That takes incredible strength. Min-Jun was quiet for a moment, his hands still. Then, will my father love me if I can hear? The question pierced Lydia's heart. Your father should love you whether you can hear or not. But yes, I think this might help him see what he's been missing. Not because hearing makes you more valuable, but because sometimes people need their eyes opened to what's right in front of them. What if it doesn't work? Then we try something else, and something else after that. I'm not giving up on you, Min-Jun. Everyone gives up eventually. I didn't give up on my son. I won't give up on you. On the fourth day, the device was ready. Lydia had calibrated it as precisely as possible, given her limited equipment. The neural mapping looked good. The algorithms were optimized. There was no reason it shouldn't work. Except all the reasons it might not. Lee Tae-yang arrived at Min-Jun's room that evening, the first time he'd visited his son's wing in months, according to Min-Jun's signs. The boy's eyes went wide when his father entered, shock and fear and desperate hope all mixing together in his expression. "Hello, Min-Jun," Lee Tae-yang said, though his son couldn't hear him. Then, haltingly, his hands moved in signs Lydia had taught him over the past days. "Hello, son." Min-Jun's hands trembled as he signed back. "Father? I'm here. I'm sorry I haven't been here before." Lydia gave them a moment, watching as Lee Tae-yang sat down across from his son, really looked at him for what might have been the first time in years. Then she cleared her throat and began signing. "Min-Jun, we're ready to try the device. Are you ready?" The boy nodded, his eyes huge. "It won't hurt. You'll feel a slight pressure behind your ear when I activate it. Then, if everything works, you'll start to hear sounds. They might be strange at first. Your brain has to learn to process them, but slowly, the sounds will start to make sense. And then I'll hear voices. Yes, you'll hear your father's voice. You'll hear mine. You'll hear everything." Min-Jun looked at his father. "What does your voice sound like?" Lee Tae-yang's hands moved slowly, carefully. "We're about to find out together." Lydia brought out the device. Her hands were steady now, all the fear and uncertainty channeled into focus. She'd done this 1,000 times in simulation. This was just another test. Except it wasn't. This was a child's life. This was the moment everything either worked or failed. She fitted the device carefully behind Min-Jun's ear, the processor resting against his temporal bone. The fit was perfect, invisible unless you knew to look for it. She pulled out her phone, opened the calibration app, and checked the readings. Everything looked good. "Ready?" she signed. Min-Jun nodded. Lydia activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Min-Jun's expression stayed the same, hopeful and terrified. Then his eyes went wide. His hand flew to the device. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. "Min-Jun?" Lydia signed. "What do you hear?" His hands moved, shaky and uncertain. "Buzzing, like insects, but different, inside my head." "That's your brain, starting to process sound. It will get clearer. Just breathe. Let it happen." Min-Jun closed his eyes, his face scrunched in concentration. Lydia watched the readings on her phone. The neural interface was working, pathways forming, the device and brain learning to communicate. The algorithms were adjusting in real time, refining, optimizing. Then Min-Jun's eyes opened, and they were different, aware in a new way. "I hear..." His signs were confused. "Something. A rumbling?" Lee Tae-yang's breath caught. "That's my voice," he whispered. "Louder," Lydia urged. "Say something louder." Lee Tae-yang leaned forward. "Min-Jun, can you hear me, son?" Min-Jun's face transformed. Confusion melted into wonder, wonder into joy, joy into tears. His hands moved frantically. "Father, that's you? That sound is you?" "Yes, that's me. I'm talking to you, Min-Jun. I'm finally talking to you." The boy launched himself at his father, wrapping his small arms around Lee Tae-yang's neck. Lee Tae-yang caught him, held him, and for the first time since Lydia had entered this house, she saw him crack completely. Tears streamed down his face as he held his son, saying his name over and over, and Min-Jun could hear it, could hear every word. Lydia stepped back, giving them privacy, her own tears flowing freely. She'd done it. The device worked. Min-Jun could hear. After 3 years of building and hoping and dreaming, she'd finally given a deaf child his hearing. But as she watched father and son reunite, she felt the weight of what came next. Because this was where her plan had ended. She'd given Min-Jun his hearing. Mission accomplished. Now she was supposed to disappear before anyone asked too many questions about where the device came from, how it worked, what laws she'd broken to create it. Except she'd made a promise. I'm not giving up on you, Min-Jun. And disappearing would be giving up. The next weeks were miraculous and challenging in equal measure. Min-Jun's brain had to learn to process sound, to turn meaningless noise into meaningful information. Lydia worked with him daily, teaching him to identify different sounds, to understand speech, to navigate a world that was suddenly full of input he'd never experienced before. Why do people talk so much? Min-Jun asked one afternoon, frustrated after a particularly overwhelming session. He still preferred signing when he was tired, using speech as a secondary language he was learning. It's so loud. Everything is loud. You'll adjust, Lydia assured him. Your brain is still learning. Give it time. I don't want time. I want to understand everything now. Lydia smiled. That's not how learning works. Be patient with yourself. But Min-Jun was thriving. For the first time in his life, he could communicate with anyone, not just those who knew sign language. He talked to the other servants, to Mrs. Park, to his tutor. He talked constantly, making up for 8 years of enforced silence. And most importantly, he talked to his father. Lee Tae-yang had changed too. He came home earlier now, spent evenings with Min-Jun, made up for lost time with desperate intensity. Lydia watched them together and felt something warm and painful in her chest. This was what she'd wanted for Jae-hyun, this second chance. But good things, in Lydia's experience, never lasted. She was cleaning the main hallway when she overheard the conversation. Mrs. Park's voice, sharp with suspicion. I'm telling you, something is strange about that woman. She spends too much time with the young master, and how did he suddenly start hearing? The master won't explain it. He just says it's handled. Another servant responded, maybe the master hired real specialists this time. Then where are they? Why hasn't anyone come to the house? And why is he suddenly so secretive? Lydia's heart sank. She'd known this was coming. The device was too effective. Min-Jun's improvement, too dramatic. People would ask questions, and eventually, those questions would lead to her. She needed to leave. Now, before the investigation began, before Lee Tae-yang felt compelled to reveal her identity to protect his son's miracle, she could slip away, disappear back into the anonymous mass of Seoul, leave the device with Min-Jun and instructions for its care. He didn't need her anymore. He had his hearing. He had his father. That night, Lydia packed her few belongings. She left a letter for Lee Tae-yang explaining the device's maintenance requirements. She left another letter for Min-Jun, trying to explain why she had to go, knowing he'd feel abandoned again, but hoping he'd eventually understand. She was halfway down the servants' stairs when she ran into Min-Jun. The boy stood in her path, his eyes red from crying. In his hand, he held the letter she'd left in his room. You're leaving, he said. His voice was clearer now, though still hesitant with the newness of speech. You promised You wouldn't give up on me. Min-Jun, I'm not giving up. You can hear now. You don't need me anymore. Yes, I do. You're the only one who understood me. Even now. Even with hearing. Lydia knelt down to his level. Your father understands you now. He's learning. Give him a chance. But you understand me better. You know what it's like. To lose someone. To be alone. I know. But I can't stay, Min-Jun. People are asking questions about how you got your hearing. If they investigate, they'll find out about the device, about me. I broke laws to create it. I could go to prison. Then father will protect you. He has lawyers. Lots of lawyers. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're running because you're scared. But you told me being scared doesn't mean you have to give up. The words hit home. Lydia closed her eyes. This is different. No, it's not. You're just like everyone else. You helped me, and now you're leaving. Min-Jun, I heard my father crying last night, the boy interrupted. His voice wavered, but he pushed forward. He was in his study. He thought no one could hear. But I could hear. And he was crying because he said he'd finally found someone who could help me, and he was afraid you'd leave. He said he'd finally found someone who saw me as a person instead of a problem, and he didn't know how to make you stay. Lydia's breath caught. He said that. He loves you, I think. The way he looks at you when you're teaching me, it's different from how he looks at anyone else. Min-Jun, that's not... And I love you too. Not like father does, but like you're the mother I don't have. The one who understands. Please don't go, Lydia. Please. I finally found someone who chose me. Don't unchoose me now. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Lydia pulled Min-Jun into her arms, holding him tight. I'm not unchoosing you. I could never. But I'm scared, Min-Jun. I'm scared that if I stay, everything will fall apart. Then let it fall apart. We'll build something new. A voice from the top of the stairs made them both look up. Li Tae-yang stood there, still in his work clothes, looking exhausted and desperate. He's right, Li Tae-yang said. Let it fall apart. I have the best lawyers in the country. Whatever laws you broke, we'll handle it. Whatever consequences there are, we'll face them. But don't leave. Don't leave him. Don't leave. He paused, swallowed hard. Don't leave us. Lydia stood slowly, Min-Jun still pressed against her side. You don't understand what you're asking. The institute will come after me. The government could press charges. This could destroy your reputation. I don't care about my reputation. I care about my son. And I care about the woman who gave him back his hearing when no one else could. The woman who saw him as a person worth saving when I was too blind to do the same. Mr. Li Tae-yang. Call me Tae-yang. We're past formalities now. Lydia looked between father and son, seeing their faces, reading their desperation. And she realized Min-Jun was right. She was running. Running because staying meant risk, meant vulnerability, meant opening herself up to loss again. But running also meant abandoning this boy who'd already been abandoned too many times. Running meant giving up on the family she'd accidentally built in this cold house. If I stay, she said slowly, things will get complicated. People will investigate. They'll find out who I am, what I did. There will be legal battles, media attention. Everything you've kept private about Min-Jun will become public. Then we'll face it together, Tae-yang said. All of us, as a family. Family? He came down the stairs, stopping a few feet away from her. You gave my son his hearing. But more than that, you gave him something I couldn't. Unconditional acceptance. You saw him not as broken, but as different. Not as a problem, but as a person. You did for him what I should have done from the beginning, and in doing so, you taught me how to be a father again. I just did what any decent person would do. No, you did what very few people would do. You risked everything for a child who wasn't even yours. You built an impossible device with no resources, no support, no reason to hope except that you refused to let another deaf child go unheard. That's not decency. That's heroism. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't save her own son. You saved mine, and that matters. It matters to me. It matters to Min-Jun. Tae-Yang's voice dropped, became softer, more intimate. It matters more than you know. Lydia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not just gratitude, not just respect. Something deeper, more complicated, more dangerous. You don't know me, she said quietly. Not really. You don't know the things I've done, the lines I've crossed. Then tell me. We have time. I've lost everything once already. I don't know if I can risk losing everything again. Then don't lose it. Stay. Build something new here. With us. Min-Jun's hand tightened on hers. Please, Lydia, don't go. And looking at them, feeling Min-Jun's small hand in hers and seeing the desperate hope in Tae-Yang's eyes, Lydia realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she entered this house with an illegal device and a broken promise to her dead son. She'd made it every time she'd signed with Min-Jun, every time she'd challenged Tae-Yang to be better, every time she'd chosen to stay instead of running. She'd been running for 5 years. Maybe it was time to stop. Okay, she said softly, I'll stay. But when this all blows up, and it will blow up, don't say I didn't warn you. Tae-Yang smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look years younger. Consider me warned. Min-Jun threw his arms around her again, and this time Lydia let herself hold him without reservation, without planning her escape, without protecting herself from the inevitable loss, because maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The investigation came 2 weeks later. A reporter for a medical journal had somehow gotten wind of Min-Jun's miraculous recovery. They'd published a piece questioning how the son of a pharmaceutical magnate had suddenly regained his hearing using unknown technology. The article sparked interest from medical boards, ethics committees, and government regulators. Tae-Yang's lawyers were already prepared. They'd spent the intervening weeks building a defense strategy, gathering evidence of Lydia's credentials and the device's safety. When the Institute of Neural Technology filed a lawsuit claiming theft of proprietary information, they countered with evidence of systematic neglect and ethical violations at the institute. When the medical board tried to shut down the device pending review, they presented Min-Jun's neural scans showing no damage and significant improvement. It was exhausting and terrifying and all-consuming. Lydia spent hours in depositions, explaining her research, defending her methods, justifying her actions. The media painted her alternately as a rogue scientist endangering children or a heroic mother giving deaf kids a second chance. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. Through it all, Min-Jun kept improving. His speech became clearer, more confident. He started attending a mainstream school, making friends, living the life of a normal 8-year-old boy. And every night, he came home and told Lydia and Tae-Yang about his day, his voice filled with excitement and wonder at this world he was discovering. I heard rain today, he said one evening, his eyes bright. Real rain. I've seen rain before, but I never knew it had a sound. It's like thousands of tiny drums, all at once. It's beautiful. Lydia smiled, feeling that familiar ache in her chest. Yes, rain is beautiful. Jae-hyun never got to hear rain, did he? No, he didn't. Min-Jun was quiet for a moment. Then, I hear it for him. Every new sound I learn it for both of us. So in a way, he's hearing it too. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Min-Jun close, kissing the top of his head. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for remembering him. How could I forget? He's the reason I can hear. You built this for him. I'm just borrowing it. You're not borrowing it. It's yours. He would want you to have it. Later that night, after Min-Jun was asleep, Lydia sat in the garden, staring up at the stars. She came here often now, finding peace in the quiet darkness. Or maybe not so quiet anymore. She could hear the wind in the trees, the distant sound of traffic, the night birds calling to each other. You come here every night, Taeyang's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing there, his tie loosened, looking tired but content. May I join you? It's your garden. It's our garden now. He sat beside her on the bench. What do you think about out here? Jae-hyun. What he'd think of all this. Whether he'd approve. Of course he'd approve. You saved a child. You gave him the gift your son never got. That's beautiful. Sometimes I feel guilty, like I'm replacing Jae-hyun with Min-Jun. You're not replacing him. You're honoring him. Everything you do for Min-Jun, you do in Jae-hyun's memory. That's not replacement. That's love. Lydia leaned back, looking at the stars. How did this happen? How did I go from a disgraced researcher living in a closet-sized apartment to sitting in a billionaire's garden, talking about love? You saved my son. That tends to change things. Is that all this is? Gratitude? You know it's not. Taeyang's voice was soft, serious. I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, technically. I know the power dynamics are all wrong. But I can't stop thinking about you, Lydia. About your strength, your courage, your refusal to give up, even when everything was against you. You're remarkable. I'm a criminal. Let's not forget that. You're someone who broke unjust rules to save a child. That's different. The law doesn't see it that way. Then the law is wrong. He turned to face her. Lydia, I know I don't deserve you. I know I was a terrible father, that I failed Min-Jun for years before you came, but you've given me a second chance. With him, yes, but also with myself. You've shown me what it means to actually care about someone more than your own pride or reputation. I want to be worthy of that lesson. I want to be worthy of you. Taeyang, I'm not asking for anything. Not yet. I know you need time. I know you've lost too much to risk your heart again. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens with the lawsuits, the investigations, the media circus, I'm standing beside you. Not because I owe you, but because I choose to. Lydia looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something in her chest that she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate hope of a last chance, but the steady hope of something that might actually last. Okay, she said softly. Stay beside me. Let's see where this goes. Taeyang smiled and took her hand, and they sat together in the garden, listening to the night sounds, building something new from the broken pieces of their pasts. The legal battles continued for months, but eventually, grudgingly, the courts ruled in Lydia's favor. The device was deemed safe and effective. Her methods, while unorthodox, had produced results where conventional medicine had failed. The Institute of Neural Technology's lawsuit was dismissed, and slowly, carefully, other families began reaching out. asking if the device could help their deaf children too. Lydia established a foundation, funded by Taeyang but run by her, to provide the device to families who couldn't afford conventional treatments. She trained other researchers in the technology, sharing everything she'd learned, and one by one, deaf children began to hear. It wasn't a miracle, it was science, hard work, and a refusal to accept that some problems were unsolvable. But to the families, to the children who'd lived in silence and now heard their parents' voices, it felt like magic. Min-Jun became the face of the foundation, speaking at events, sharing his story. He talked about what it was like to live in a silent world and what it was like to suddenly hear. He talked about Jae-hyun, the boy who died so that others might hear. And he called Lydia his mother, publicly, proudly, until it became true in every way that mattered. 2 years after Lydia first entered the Lee mansion, she married Taeyang in a small ceremony in the garden where they'd first admitted their feelings. Min-Jun stood beside them, grinning, his voice clear and strong, as he read a poem he'd written about family and second chances and the people who refuse to give up. "We are all here because someone didn't give up," he read, "because someone saw a problem and decided it wasn't unsolvable, because someone loved us enough to break the rules. That's what family means. Not blood, not biology, but choice. We choose each other, every day, and that's the greatest gift of all." As Lydia stood there, holding Taeyang's hands, listening to Min-Jun's voice, she thought about Jae-hyun, about the little boy she'd lost, who'd taught her what it meant to fight for someone you loved. She'd failed to save him, but in failing, she'd learned how to save others. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that was how loss transformed into purpose. "Thank you," she whispered to the sky, to Jae-hyun wherever he was. "Thank you for teaching me not to give up." The wind rustled through the garden, carrying the sound of laughter and music and life. And for the first time in 5 years, Lydia felt at peace. She'd come to the Lee mansion as a broken woman, with nothing left to lose. She'd left behind the maid's uniform and the pretense, but she'd gained something far more valuable: a family. Not the family she'd planned or expected, but the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back. Min-Jun grew up confident and brilliant, his deafness a part of his history, but not his identity. He learned to navigate both the hearing world and the deaf community, becoming a bridge between them, an advocate for accessibility and understanding. He never forgot where he came from or who'd given him his voice. And every year, on Jae-hyun's birthday, the family gathered in the garden. They shared stories about him, keeping his memory alive. Min-Jun would talk about hearing rain for his lost brother, about learning new sounds for both of them. And Lydia would cry, but they were good tears now, healing tears, because she'd learned something important in that cold mansion that had eventually become a home. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never making mistakes or never losing people. Love was about showing up, about refusing to give up, about seeing someone, really seeing them, and choosing them anyway. The billionaire's son had been silent for 8 years, but he'd never truly been deaf. He'd been unheard. And sometimes Lydia thought those were different things. The world had failed to listen, failed to accommodate, failed to see him as anything other than broken. But he'd never been broken. He'd just been waiting for someone who understood the difference. As the sun set over the garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Lydia watched her family. Taeyang sat with Min-Jun, the two of them examining something on a tablet, heads bent together, talking easily. The distance that had once existed between them was gone, replaced by genuine connection. They were learning each other, day by day, making up for lost time. Min-Jun looked up and caught her watching. He smiled and signed, even though he didn't need to anymore. "I love you, Mom." Lydia signed back, "I love you too." Then Min-Jun added out loud, his voice warm with affection, "Come here. Father's showing me the plans for the new foundation building. You need to see this." Lydia crossed the garden, settling between them, looking at the architectural drawings on the screen. The new building would house research labs, clinical spaces, and a memorial garden dedicated to Jae-hyun. A place where science and memory would coexist, where the past would inform the future, where loss would transform into legacy. "It's perfect," Lydia said softly. "Just like our family," Min-Jun added, and even though the words were simple, almost childish, they held truth, because they were perfect. Not in the conventional sense, they were complicated and unconventional and had been forged from pain and loss and illegal medical procedures. But they were real, they were chosen, and they were hers. The billionaire's silent heir had found his voice. But more importantly, he'd found a family who loved him for who he was, not who they wanted him to be. And the woman who'd lost everything had discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to try again, to love again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. As night fell and the first stars appeared, they sat together in the garden. Three people who'd been strangers once, now bound by something stronger than blood, the choice to be a family. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear another child laughing. Free from pain, finally at peace, knowing that his mother had kept her promise after all. She'd saved a child, just not the one she'd expected to save. And in doing so, she'd saved herself.